It's undoubtedly been a rough year for big tech, especially for workers in the space who've been let go or are bracing for more layoff announcements. In the US, more than 88,000 workers in the sector have been laid off as part of mass job cuts so far in 2022. That's according to Crunchbase. Now, many company execs have attributed the widespread downsizing to the hiring frenzy that happened during the pandemic. So what will be the impact on the labour market? Well, with us now to discuss is Anneliese Vance-Sherman, regional labour economist at the Washington State Employment Security Department. Thank you for joining us this morning. So I first want to get your take on what we're seeing in terms of the layoffs and how much do you expect this to continue? Is this something we can continue to expect into the first half of next year?
Well, I think one of the first things to understand is some of the constraints in the data. A lot of the layoff announcements that were made were in the last week of October and early November. But the data that we're looking at in the current jobs report references the second week of October. So this is still lagging behind. Now, that said, we're still seeing a strong labor market, a 3.7% unemployment rate, and overall continuing to add jobs. But the question really comes, what will next month's report tell us? Because for the most part, it's not going to be captured in this report.
Anneliese, you look at the regional economy there. Obviously, Amazon, a huge employer. We've already gotten reports of 10,000 layoffs. Some reports suggesting the number could be double that. What's been the impact on the local level?
Well, again, this is one of those challenges where we're chasing the data to figure out what's going on. We have some official WARN notices, that's worker advisory and retraining notices for Meta and for Twitter in Washington State, and those have already gone through the process. We've got the documentation for that. We know that there are large-scale layoffs happening at Amazon, but when we look at those numbers, it's still a relatively small proportion of jobs. And I don't mean to downplay that. Of course, this is still a large number of jobs, large number of families and individuals impacted by these layoffs that are happening. But so far, the numbers show a relatively small, about 3% drop in employment. So, of course, in a place like Seattle, where we do have a lot of high concentration of tech jobs, that is going to have an impact.
Well, and that's my follow-up there. I realize that, you've got to crunch the data here, but given just what a tech hub Seattle is, are there enough openings, for example, to be able to support some of these cuts that have come through major employers like Amazon?
We have yet to see that, but one thing that we are seeing is in Washington, as the rest of the country, we're seeing record numbers of job openings. We're seeing a lot of voluntary quits, a lot of these measures that reinforce the idea of a strong economy. We know that there are a lot of different employers that might not have the same big names that are looking for that skill set. When we're looking at tech, it's hard to measure because this is a skill set that's spread across a number of different sectors. Of course, a lot of them are concentrated in sectors such as the information sector, or in the case of Seattle with Amazon in retail trade. But we also have a lot of hospitals looking for the skill sets that these employees bring. A lot of different, public sector and private sector employers, including smaller employers that might have had difficulty competing, that will likely absorb a lot of these jobs.
So, Anneliese, just quickly before we run out of time, what is the best gauge then to really get a sense of what's happening with tech sector layoffs? What data are you looking at?
Primarily, I'm looking at the lagged data. We are going to always have this lag built into the data. But when I'm looking at the monthly reports, I think one thing that was interesting in Washington State, I was surprised to see that the October report did show some layoffs in the information sector, which I was not expecting to show up until the November numbers were published. So we have seen a downturn already in these numbers that's telling us that these layoffs are in process. They are indeed happening. We have documentation through WARN notices that these layoffs are happening. One other measure that we looked at very closely during the pandemic was unemployment insurance claims data. That's weekly, so we tend to have, with the more frequent cadence, we could look at that as a leading indicator, but we're not going to be able to rely on that this time around. And the reason is that a lot of the jobs do come with severance packages. And so we won't be able to use that as a leading indicator. So right now it's going to be a difficult one to measure because they're coming from a number of different sectors. And we're not really going to have unemployment insurance showing up until perhaps later, if at all, as hopefully that cushion helps provide people that bridge into their next job.